All right, get ready to dive deep into United Spirits Limited's Q2 FY25 performance. You guys sent in their earnings call transcript, the press release, and even the audio of the investor Q&A. We're going all in on this one.
What's really interesting is how this quarter kind of gives us a peek into how the whole beverage industry is being affected by the economy. We're going to see what's working, what's not, and how United Spirits is staying ahead of the game.
Exactly. So first, let's set the stage. It's been a little rough out there, hasn't it? Inflation is putting the squeeze on consumers, especially those buying the cheaper brands. And now we're seeing the luxury market slow down too. It's almost like a luxury hiccup.
Yeah, it's like what's happening in other high-end sectors, cars, electronics. People are being a bit more cautious no matter how much they're spending.
There is some good news though. Middle India, that's a huge chunk of the population, seems to be holding steady. The normal monsoon season this year and inflation easing up is definitely helping. So the mass market might be feeling the pinch, but the middle class seems to be doing okay.
Yeah, that's a key thing to keep in mind as we look at United Spirits' performance. How are they handling these different segments of the market, especially since they've been pushing hard into the premium category?
Well, let's look at their top line numbers. Net sales value dipped a bit year over year, and the prestige and above segment was flat.
Remember, they had a killer Q1 this fiscal year, so a little slowdown was expected, but they are a bit behind their projections for the first half of the year.
And they're giving a few reasons for that. First, that leveling off after the strong Q1, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Then there's this route to market disruption in a key northern state, but they wouldn't say which one on the call. Sounds like they're dealing with some regulatory stuff. And lastly, a few temporary hiccups that they say are already fixed.
It just goes to show that even the best laid plans can get messed up by things outside your control. Speaking of big opportunities, though, Andhra Pradesh.
Right. They're back in business there after 5 years.
Yeah.
That's going to be huge for them, right?
Absolutely. It's already adding to their revenue, and they're projecting it'll be 4 to 4.5% of their national prestige and above sales in the next couple years. The potential is massive.
What I find interesting is they're saying the policies in Andhra Pradesh are a lot like Telangana, their neighboring state. So they might be able to repeat some of their success there.
Good point. Now let's talk margins. They actually beat expectations this quarter, hitting 17.8%. So what's behind that?
Well, a few things have worked in their favor. ENA inflation, that's the cost of extra neutral alcohol, the key ingredient, has been balanced out by glass prices going down. So that's helped. Plus, their cost optimization programs, like that multi-year supply agility thing they've got going on, are showing results. And they've been smart about managing their pricing and product mix, what they call revenue growth management.
Yeah, it's a classic example of how to handle business in a tough climate. You control what you can control and find ways to be more efficient.
They did spend more on marketing this quarter, though. They say it's to boost sales during the festive season. So taking a bit of a hit now, but thinking long term.
And they're still aiming for that high teens margin range long term. Makes sense. Investing in your brands at the right time is key for long-term success.
Okay, let's switch gears and talk innovation. What have they been working on?
Oh, they've been busy. McDowell's X Series, a non-whiskey line, just launched in 3 markets.
Interesting. Premium packaging at a price that's not crazy high. That might be a winning combo.
We'll see. And they're expanding the Don Julio tequila line, including that super premium 1942 variant. Their Gawan single malt whiskey is going bigger too. They've partnered with the Taj group of hotels, pretty fancy. And they're expanding to new markets with that one.
Wow, aiming high there.
Then you've got 3 new Smirnoff vodka flavors made for Indian tastes. Shows they're paying attention to local preferences. And maybe the most interesting thing, they launched the Good Craft Co. Flavor Lab in Bangalore. Seems like they're focused on craft spirit innovation.
That's an interesting move. Are they trying to get ahead of a trend, maybe?
Could be. We've seen craft spirits get popular in other markets, so it might be a smart move to get ahead of it.
All right, let's talk about their brand activations. They're bringing back McDowell's Yari Jam, playing on that nostalgia, which could be really effective. Royal Challenge is doing a sweepstakes for trips to Dubai. Signature is sticking with its partnership with the ZIRO Music Festival and taking it to more cities.
And Tanquery's teamed up with Emily in Paris. I wonder if they're trying to reach a younger, more trendy crowd with that.
Wouldn't surprise me. So they're really going broad here, hitting all sorts of demographics and interests with these activations.
Definitely seems that way.
Now let's get back to that mysterious northern state. Analysts are trying to figure out which one it is, but United Spirits is keeping quiet.
All they'd say is it's an important state for them, a high-end market with constraints on ease of doing business. Sounds like regulatory issues to me, and they think it'll be sorted out in the next few months.
So this could make or break their second half performance. A real wild card.
Definitely something to keep an eye on, especially since they're saying it's a big market for them.
And speaking of wild cards, there's talk that a competitor might sell off a lower prestige brand. Could that be an opportunity for United Spirits, you think?
That's a good question. But from what they've said, they seem focused on their existing flagship brands and making their portfolio smaller.
A less is more approach, huh? Focus on what works, simplify the rest.
Exactly. They're betting on building strong brands for the long haul rather than going for quick wins by buying up other companies.
Okay, so we've covered a lot.
We have. And it's clear that United Spirits is playing a complex game, juggling short-term challenges with long-term goals.
But what does it all mean for you, our listener? What are the key takeaways here? We'll unpack that in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we just went super in-depth on United Spirits' performance and the big economic forces that are really shaping the beverage industry. So what does it all mean?
It's like we're trying to decipher some secret code, isn't it? You've got all these different factors kind of swirling around.
Yeah.
And you're just trying to figure out the big picture.
Exactly. And one thing that really stands out is that United Spirits is operating in a really complex and constantly changing market. I mean, they're dealing with inflation, consumer behavior that keeps shifting, and even those regulatory challenges we talked about.
Right. But at the same time, they're also taking advantage of opportunities like Andhra Pradesh opening back up and the growing demand for premium drinks. It's like they're playing offense and defense at the same time.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's not just about growth at all costs. It's more about being strategic, finding that balance between making a profit now and planning for growth down the line.
And don't forget about that northern state mystery. It's a good reminder that government regulations can really shake things up, sometimes in ways you don't expect. And that's something to keep in mind, not just for United Spirits, but for the whole industry, really.
Absolutely. Now, for you, our listener, what are the big takeaways from this deep dive? First off, it shows just how important it is to understand those big macroeconomic trends and how they can impact specific industries. Even well-established companies like United Spirits aren't immune to changes in consumer spending or those shifts in regulations.
Yeah, like the saying goes, a rising tide lifts all boats, but a falling tide can leave some stranded. You got to know which way the tide is going before you set sail.
Exactly. Second, this is a great example of how important it is to be adaptable. United Spirits is adjusting their strategy as they go, finding a balance between their premium push and focusing on their core brands, all while navigating the supply chain issues. Being able to adapt like that is so important for success in the long run.
It's like playing chess. You got to anticipate your opponent's moves and be ready to change your strategy.
Exactly. Third, their commitment to innovation is a lesson for any business. They're not just sitting back and relying on what they already have. They're experimenting with new drinks, new flavors, new ways to connect with their customers. They're even looking at what's going on in the craft spirits scene.
It's like they have this culture of innovation built into their DNA. They're not afraid to try new things and see what sticks.
And finally, the fact that they're beating those margin expectations, even with all these challenges, that shows how efficient they are. They're finding ways to control costs, get the pricing right, and improve productivity, even in a market that's all over the place.
So they're doing a lot of things right. But what are some of the key questions you, our listener, should be thinking about after this deep dive?
Well, I think one of the biggest questions is how sustainable is this premiumization strategy, especially if that slowdown in luxury spending keeps going. Will they need to shift gears and focus more on the middle of the market? Or will that luxury hiccup be a short-term thing?
That's a great question. And it connects to another important one. How are those regulations going to change? And what impact will that have on the whole industry? That northern state situation shows how much those policy changes can create uncertainty.
For sure. And we can't forget about the competition. Will their rivals follow their lead and start streamlining their portfolios? Or will we see a bunch of mergers and acquisitions?
These are all questions that investors and anyone watching the industry will be paying close attention to in the coming months.
Yeah, it's a really dynamic situation. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But now let's zoom out a little and think bigger. What are the bigger trends at work here? And what might the future hold for the beverage industry as a whole?
It's like we were looking at all the tiny details of this United Spirits report, and now we're stepping back to see the whole picture.
Exactly. And it's interesting how a lot of the things we're seeing with United Spirits are happening all over the beverage industry.
Yeah, like that change in how people are buying things. We talked about luxury spending slowing down.
Yeah.
Is that just temporary, or is it a sign of something bigger?
Yeah. That's a question a lot of companies are trying to figure out. It's making them think more strategically. Can they appeal to people who are looking for more value for their money without hurting their premium brands? That's the tough part.
And what about those regulatory issues? That northern state situation really showed how much of an impact government policies can have.
For sure, companies have to be flexible and adapt to those changing regulations, and they need to be smart and try to anticipate what's coming next.
It's like walking through a minefield. You take one wrong step and
Yeah, maybe not that dramatic.
yeah.
But yeah, it's complicated out there. But even with all the challenges, there are opportunities. Like we talked about with United Spirits and their focus on innovation, that's something we're seeing across the whole industry. New flavors, new products, new ways to connect with people.
Right. And it's not just about coming up with something new. It's about creating something that people actually want, something that speaks to them and what they're looking for.
Exactly. And that's why understanding those bigger trends is so important. What are people looking for these days? What do they care about? What do they want to achieve? The companies that can figure that out, those are the ones that'll succeed in the long run.
So for you, our listener, this deep dive into United Spirits is really a tiny example of what's happening in the whole beverage industry. There are challenges, but there are also chances to do something great.
And the big takeaway here is knowledge is power. When you understand the trends, the challenges, and the opportunities, you can make better decisions. Whether you're an investor, someone starting a business, or just someone who likes to stay informed.
So pay attention, keep learning, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Here's one last thought for you. We've talked a lot about adapting to change, but what if you could see it coming? What if you could stay ahead of the game? That's the real power of knowledge. It lets you not just react, but predict, innovate, and shape the future.
That's a great way to put it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back soon with another look at something you care about. Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.